What happens when craft and making engage with science, industry, business? What happens and what goes on there? Not simply to share, as they do with each other, but rather to create something new that neither had before. And that's something that couldn't have happened without each of them, industry, business, science, whatever, being changed, artists and makers being changed by the disruption and the energy that arises from within the collaboration. And we've taken those imperatives, the imperatives that drive our makeshift agenda, and applied them in a new, more socially driven areas at this conference. Social innovation, environmental sustainability, health and well-being. We've put them in areas where social justice becomes a very powerful imperative and driver. We've opened up thinking, I think, during the conference on a set of familiar concepts. Above all, when we focus not on craft, but on social challenge. And I think that's what we've done very well in this conference. We've started over and over again with social challenges rather than with craft. And that's very important because we can then show the distinctive approaches that craft brings and what the benefit of that is. Experimentation and innovation don't themselves require new techniques. That's one thing I've taken from this conference. It may have new techniques, may even have new materials, but let's detach innovation from technology and from new forms of practice. Experimentation and the ensuing innovation can actually come from existing techniques used differently in practice or in ideas or in new social settings. And that's really important for us, I think, because if we're not going to have craft sucked into the current assumption that innovation means technology, we have to liberate ourselves from that link. Indeed, so much of the conference has been about taming technology, making it a tool, not a driver. And I think that's an advance we've made since 2014. Anything other than that would have lost, of course, what creative input can make. And that connects with the discipline of craft. I think makers have disciplines: ceramics, glass, weaving, metalworking, and so on. And they're often rooted in their disciplines. But as we showed in our Innovation Through Craft report, those disciplines are essential for the innovation. But if makers start from the discipline, their real creativity comes from putting it to one side and experimenting. And experimentation means innovation that often comes out of failure. And comes out of the unexpected. As Leonard Cohen, who sadly died yesterday, reminded us, forget your perfect offering. And that's a good thing for us to keep remembering. Forget your perfect offering. Now, putting the discipline to one side requires confidence. Confidence from knowing that skills, from the knowing that skills, knowledge of material, the history of the craft is all there. And you can return to it as you need to, but you put it aside and experiment. And that points to another fundamental reflection, I think, and it's one that Annie raised just now. It's one I would make as a historian, but it's important to craft and what craft is. New technology, new ways of working, new ways of collaborating drive us forward. It's one dimension of what has made this conference so exciting. But all this newness only makes sense if it's placed in the context of the past. Because if we don't look back and understand that past, what brought us here will never move forward. And it isn't about putting traditions of craft and making aside in the pursuit of the new. Rather, it's building on understanding and materials and knowledge of the past, skill, as we've come to see it at this conference, in a much more subtle way, I think, than we've often discussed it in the past. Maybe care or love, as Mark Miodownik inserted into the concept of skill at the start. We need to build on all of that to create new possibilities, to create innovation that goes way beyond the product. Innovation that can be unleashed by craft when it engages with other disciplines, other challenges, other questions. And I think we've shown that so much yesterday and today, though I must say, I felt throughout it that we're at the start of a long journey. There are a lot of those questions still need addressing. We've given ourselves a better grip on materials. Yes, we've heard a lot about the exciting uses of materials, even in the exceptional Maker's Breakfast presentation this morning, and those 6 presentations were incredible, I thought. It was the potential of materials, wherever they were from, new or not, that dominated, released by technology, not led by technology. And I was really struck by that in those presentations this morning. This year, say what I've said before, technology was tamed in our vision. It was made our servant, a very creative and collaborative servant, but nonetheless not what actually drove us. Instead, we brought to prominence the frames in which material is used and experienced. And I won't forget Shelley James telling us, was it only yesterday afternoon, how science students used the heat of a candle to adapt a pipette and simply to make it slightly different. And by doing that, they were personally released from the domination of scientific instrumentation. It gave them back control. We've also got a broader grip on making. Not only making things, but the fact that we're making new ways of working and new forms of collaborating as new ways to sustainability and to well-being. Making things was often secondary in what we've been talking about, which leads me to the danger of a transactional model that often shapes discussion in all sorts of sectors, but particularly creative sectors, that ideas and skills lead to change, that if you do X, you get product outcome Y. When all the interesting activity and all the interesting change goes on in the space between X and outcome Y. And that came up again and again yesterday and today for me. It was even true in the astonishingly successful innovation through collaboration space that you referred to, Annie, where people were enthused about actually making. Ideas flowed, people worked together. It was the process that got people so excited of working together. What goes on between X and Y? And that all threw down the real challenge to what we mean by innovation. Yes, we heard much about innovative uses of material, technology, products, and so on. But a recurrent theme yesterday and today, certainly in the main hall, was other forms of innovation. The innovation that comes out of the potential of craft thinking, practice, and relationships. Innovation, I'll say it for the last time, is what goes on between X and Y. It isn't what is the outcome of X producing on Y. So we talked a lot about social innovation, which drove us to recognize that there's been too much talk of the potential of craft has not actually addressed the challenge of other innovations that were needed to make the potential of craft real, especially real on the scale that is needed. If we're talking about sustainability, if we're talking about social justice, very small, limited, exciting changes are not going to constitute the level of change that we need. And so we need other innovations. We need innovations in business models, in forms of collaboration and enterprise, in monetizing, contracting, in the scalability of output, which doesn't mean the scalability of production unit. All of that is the areas of innovation we've reflected on quite a lot, and they've actually been, I think, in some ways, the more challenging issues that we need to address. That's really important. Innovation is not just rhetoric. It's about real, meaningful change. And that means far more than making, and that's the challenge. I think we've seen how the culture surrounding craft and making can powerfully help shape the answers. But as I said before, we're at the start of a journey in which we find how craft and making can really help shape those answers.